And we're live. ZLS number 019. This is our second one with the guest. Yesterday we had Nicole, who was awesome. Today Lars is going to be awesome too. So thank you so much for coming on, Lars. We know each other a little bit from In-Depth. I'm not super active on there, but I know you are. You're super active on In-Depth. But yeah, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. Stack the Rose. That's like a nice name for hitman or a mobster or something like that.
I never thought of it that way, but we'll go with it.
Yeah, well, I'm Lars Brink, and today I'm representing In-Depth.dev. Formerly, it was the Angle on Depth publication on Medium. Today, it's an actual business led by Max Koretsky. I'm
also
just,
at Narwhal, by the way.
Yeah, also at Narwhal, but he's also an entrepreneur of the In-Depth company, and I'm just helping out in my spare time. I don't have anything, I don't have any tie to the business or something like that. I'm just helping onboard new writers and mentor them and help them improve their writing skills. So the team, there's actually a team behind In-Depth now. There's Max, and then there's a community manager, a graphical designer, and a couple of developers. And what is In-Depth? So it's a learning platform, and Angle on Depth was always a free publication. That's something that's very important to me. That's actually how I got started with Angular. I don't know about you, but I was following Max and a few other really good experts on Angular when I got started. So I'd like to contribute that back.
Yeah, I actually have a really interesting story with Max way back when. So I got started because I got thrown into a project. I didn't know what to do for front end stuff. So I was like, I grabbed a tutorial from Asim. I'm forgetting his last name, but it was, what's that?
Asim Hussein, right?
Asim Hussein, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, Alex. So Alex there. Alex is also a big In-Depth guy. But so I got started just doing Angular stuff. I was writing like terrible code, slinging stuff, getting it out, pushing it out to internal networks. And I was like, there's something to this Angular thing. And I started trying to get more plugged into the community. That's why I started getting on Twitter. And I saw Max. This was before In-Depth was a thing, I think. He was just writing posts on Medium before it was like branded. And he had an idea for an article. He didn't have time to write it, but he said, I'll share what I've found so someone else can write it. I didn't feel confident enough to do that, but I was like, hey, whoever you end up doing this with, can I just be a fly on the wall? So I did, and he chose GLE, the guy who does Zone.js. So I told them I want to be on this conversation, and I didn't let them know I was in the US, and so they scheduled it for essentially, I think it was 2 a.m. my time. Wow. I was like, F it, I'm just gonna wake up at 1 a.m. I'm gonna jump on this call because I want to do something like this. So I actually helped Gia translate it to English, the article he ended up writing a little bit, and then I got in and started. I wrote a couple of my own articles at that point, and that was my introduction. I think my articles before I got to Narwhal ended up on In-Depth somehow, but yeah, and then I kind of transitioned from there to Narwhal. So without In-Depth, I don't know where I'd be.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Well, but yeah, sorry, I've totally derailed your thing, Lars. Keep going, please.
No, that's fine. We love war stories, and I know you have one for later as well.
Yeah, this is my old coworker from my old company.
Oh.
He'd help me with these articles all the time. So
great stuff.
I have one on like the CDK tables. I actually hate. I want to redo it very badly. I think it showed a lot of foibles, but yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Lars.
Well, that's complicated, right? The CDK tables.
It is, but it's also very simple if you can if you can get it. It's a great tool for making things more simple. And I think, unfortunately, in my article, I totally encourage people to make things much more complicated than they needed to be. So that's my reasoning for wanting to go back and redo that at some point.
Zach, no regrets, man. Just keep on moving.
Maybe tables are dead to me. Never again.
Okay, well, yeah. What is in-depth today? It's a growing business, right? And we migrated away from Medium to our own platform, so it's on indepth.dev. And today it's not only about Angular; it's about more, advanced topics across web technologies. Not only Angular, but also like RX and TypeScript and Vue and React and what have you, NX. So it's still free. Every article, news article, and tutorial is still free today. You can even apply as a writer. We're accepting more writers all the time. So just go to the website and find the form, and our community manager will be in touch. There's a new website redesign coming up. Our team is very hard at work on that. There's the in-depth community on community.indepth.dev. So that's more of a forum style where you can go and comment on the articles and speak directly to the author, or you can ask any questions about the technologies we're normally discussing. There is a membership feature is being worked on for individuals, but it's more like showing your support for the platform, giving you this free content. There's a few ads on there for Narwhal and AG Grid. If you buy the membership, very cheap, you can basically get rid of the ads, and maybe we'll add some more minor features like a focused reading mode and some stuff like that. Nice little additional things. On the business side of things, online courses is being worked on. Those will be paid, and they will be primarily targeting businesses. So like onboarding packages for teams, stuff like that, for Angular and other technologies. There's the deep dive newsletter. It's I think it comes out like once per week. Max is personally curating this newsletter, coming up with the most interesting blog posts of the week from in-depth and across the web as well. And whenever there's a new episode of the podcast, which is the next thing. So I started the podcast. Yeah. Do you have any comments?
No. Keep going, please.
Okay. I started a podcast recently, and it's also called The Deep Dive. I started it because I'm working on a book right now. So I kind of stopped my writing activities to focus on the book. And then I wanted a little something to have like small increments of success and speak to some nice people. So... And I guess you can relate to that.
That's
right?
What this is for me. Just to be clear, it's like an hour a day. I can kind of do whatever I want and talk to cool people. That's the best part. If I can get more people on, I'm going to be super happy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can totally relate to that.
So Alex is saying that's when we lost you from in-depth. When was that, Alex?
I think he was talking about when Narwhal hired me.
Oh. Right. Okay, it's for you. Okay, I see.
Yeah. I think that's what he meant. I think I remember seeing it. Yeah. When you moved to Narwhal.
Okay, so the podcast. Well, I guess the format at this point is it's full-length conversations with people that are really passionate about whatever topic we're discussing. So yeah, there's 4 episodes at this point. There's one about the async pipe from Angular with Michael Lotke and Matt Vaughn. There's one about builder schematics and NX plugins with Santosh.
Async pipe's the first one, right?
Yeah. And then there's one with Santosh Yadav about builders and NX plugins and schematics. The third one was with Max Koretsky and a few other nice people, Nacho Vasquez, Nate Lipinski, Zane Suhadolnik, who wrote an article about the experience of starting to work with Angular when he was a React developer. So we discussed coming from Angular to React and the other way, from React to Angular. and kind of compare the experience there and what's when you already know one of them, what's the most difficult thing or shift in mindset to learn the other one. So that was pretty interesting as well. And the fourth one was recently released, and it was reactive front-end frameworks with two authors of smaller, less known frameworks. It was Kospalchik from Ukraine, who did a small framework called Rex. And now is the time you go look for that tweet. I sent you the one with the photo so we can see how nice it is.
Yeah,
so it's about actually using RxJS observables for like JSX UI. So you can kind of lay out different paths in the UI using just observables, because we have the complete and we have the next and we have an error. So imagine that, but with JSX, which is, if you're familiar with Angular, it's more like the template side of things, right? Similar to that. So imagine you could do that with observables directly in your template. That's what Rex is like. And he created like a library for React also that looks very similar. And now, I guess if we can zoom in, we might see this image. Yeah, there it is. So look at that. That's pretty sweet, right? I mean, there's clearly no separation of concerns, but the interesting thing here is you have an observable, and you map over the data into some component and kind of forward that data property. But if there's an error, you go down to the catch error clause and you render a different component, the error component. But before it loads, you can start this observable with the loading, like the spinner or whatever, the loading component in the lower part of the code. I think that's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, so really you can have reactive all the way from server to UI. That's pretty neat. The other guest was a nice guy called Ryan Carniato. He's from Canada originally, and he recently moved to California to join eBay to work on their Mako.js framework, which is an open JS Foundation project, but they have like several of the team members like working on it constantly, and they use it heavily within eBay. It's a high-performing isomorphic framework. So it started out on the server side. Now they want to move it to be able to render, or I guess it has done for some time, but they want to focus more on the client-side performance side of things, and that's where Ryan comes into the picture. He's like really into performance and
that was extremely interesting to listen to. So I've listened to the first one with Mike. How do I say his last name? Flatke.
Michael Latke.
Yeah, and he's a really interesting guy, by the way. Had the pleasure of meeting him at RxJS Live. It's like the only tech conference I've been to, and probably the only one I'll be to for a while because of what's going on in the world. But yeah, he's super interesting. And your most recent one I thought was just amazing when you started talking about looking at these frameworks for their benchmarks. It's very refreshing in one way to hear these benchmarks being talked about in something other than initial bundle size. It's so disappointing that that's what we're measured on sometimes, I think. I don't know. But it's refreshing to hear that enter the conversation.
Definitely. So he also gave his point of view on other frameworks like React and Svelte and Vue. And we actually came up with a challenge for Rich Harris to beat Solid.js in any benchmark and then come on to the show.
Yeah,
so that's an open challenge.
Lay down the challenge. That's gutsy. I don't think I could be that gutsy on my show. But yeah, super interesting. Interesting to hear about Svelte. Svelte's always been an interesting framework to me. I haven't really done much in anything beside Angular. Angular is where I got started in web dev. I jumped into TypeScript before I knew JavaScript or knew the difference between the two. So I feel like I have a very different perspective on things than a lot of people do. For me, TypeScript, I don't know how I would have done it without TypeScript. Like TypeScript, I was like, this is what I'm used to. Like, I guess it's cool that I could kind of break the contract every now and then. They're just throwing in any there. That's kind of nice. But
yeah. Oh no, you didn't.
No dropping any eddies. I saw a tweet actually recently that recommended like creating a new type called what was it called? It's called like fix later or something like that, but it just
Yeah.
equaled any. I thought that was pretty clever. That's pretty neat. So
yeah. So you have an experience you want to share?
I do, yeah. So let's start with this. It's super interesting to hear the conversation of reactivity in terms of performance, and to see that it does well. It seems like it does really well in terms of performance, even though originally at some point in time people had assumed it would be very bad for performance, which that was actually news to me. I would have thought, of course, reactive stuff's better. If you can do it right, you only have to update things when the stream updates. But to me, reactivity, the biggest benefit of like programming in a reactive or maybe even a declarative style is just it fits the mental model of what I'm doing so much better. Again, I'm only coming from Angular, so I'm thinking like async pipe. I like played around a little with React, and I tried to make a component that was like the async pipe, and it was just like, why am I doing this? Like, is there really any benefit to like subscribing to an observable? It seems like the whole framework's set up so you don't need to do that. But yeah. Anyways, I'm going to take us back to like this is like the OG war story for me.
Yeah.
Back in I was going to school at Clemson University. Whoop. We always wear orange on Friday for Clemson. But I was going to Clemson University. We had this like group project that was building this old Star Trek game. I don't remember everything about it. Apparently, it was a real game that we were rebuilding. I had never heard of it before we had the assignment. But it was just like you had all these grids, these like 9x9 grids, and there was like a bunch of them everywhere. And the assignment was just we needed to get this game working. It needed to be a distributed system, so like people could log in from other places, and you had a server in the background and all this stuff. And it had to be Java Swing, which if you're not familiar with it, it's like this framework for building desktop applications in Java. And I was not a fan, but I drew the short stick and I started doing the GUI stuff. I got to the point where like one state of the game I could show inside of this like clunky, weird looking UI. It looked like Minesweeper almost at the end of the day, which is a whole other thing. But I got to the point where I was like, yes, I finally did it. Like the assignment's due like in a couple days. And I'm realizing, wait a second. Like now whatever response that server gives me, I'm going to have to like figure out how all that works, like shove this into the weird code I've written already to try to just get this on screen and like somehow get everything to refresh. And I don't know. I went to my teacher and I was like, what would you feel about me just closing the window and opening it back up? And he was like, that's fine. And I was like, okay, done. That was my first foray into reactivity. A very, very poor experience. But that setting things up that way, like I wrote this entire application, really, this entire front-end application without thinking about reactivity being front and foremost. It was all imperative, set these class properties here, get stuff to show up inside of the GUI. And yeah, that's my story, really. And now like coming into Angular, like going from that to Angular, first of all, just having that automatic change detection. So you could just change stuff. At first it seemed really cool. Now it's like I spoiled it for myself. I spoiled change detection for myself because I like using observables everywhere. And so it's like, I don't know. I have this whole hypothesis that I did at the Seattle JS meetup a couple weeks back.
The one Was it the one about like hot and cold observables?
No, that was an older one from several months back. I was just on again a couple months back. I see Nicole in chat. Hey, Nicole. Nicole's the one who invited me, so I gotta give her props for that. But I did this whole thing on the DeRose hypothesis, and I've got all these like. Oh, I'm so sorry, y'all. I was like spacing and I missed all these comments. That's what I get for telling this story.
That if you say the A word, Alex will attack you with an overload of types.
Wait, the A word? You mean like
that type
animal?
That type we don't speak of.
The type we don't speak of. Nice. Yeah. There's James. Let me highlight this one. Boom! Go Tigers. James is also a Clemson grad. We had a lot of Clemson grads at our old place. It's in South Carolina there. But yeah, like I had this hypothesis that when you talk about like simplicity and easiness, I think they're two very different things. And Nicole's saying braids here in chat, and this is kind of like the comparison. Like simple is having like braids just kind of go straight down. I'm taking this completely from a talk I've heard recently that like changed my life. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's from Rich Hickey. He's the guy who did Closure.
Oh, right.
This talk, it absolutely changed the way I think about everything. Like not just programming, but like the way I think of my life. It's remarkable. And strangely, it only has like 500 YouTube views. Like we got to fix that. I'll have to tweet a link to this thing later.
Sure.
But he has this image of like it's instructions on how to braid. So you start off with just like some strings just hanging down straight. You can see very easily what each string is doing, where it's coming from, all that kind of stuff. But when we program, it's like we're purposely and needlessly taking those strings and like complecting them is the word he uses, just like twisting them until we have this like knot, and it's I don't know, it's what we do. It's like it's weird, and we don't need to. I don't think we need to. I think we can keep things like, for the most part, pretty like just straightforward. It's just sometimes we don't. Like sometimes we choose to not make that decision. And like imperative programming is the act of complecting things, is the act of like twisting things up, it seems to me.
It's funny. My daughter just taught how to braid like string or 3 pieces of string in the school like yesterday.
Oh yeah.
She was so excited. She explained to me how she did it. So it was like you're talking about with instructions. Well, you take 3 strings, and then you take the right one and you put it in the middle over the middle one. And then you take the left one, put it over the one in the middle. And she was so excited and explaining like every single step.
Yeah.
So I guess that was the imperative explanation.
Exactly. And I don't know, like so he also brought up this image of like a castle that was like being so you could build this castle a couple ways. You could kind of knit it together, like crochet it, like kind of like what your daughter's explaining. Like crochet is kind of the act of doing that in this calculated way to build this castle. But at the end of the day, like if you need to change the color of like the roof of that castle, you've got to like cut stuff off or like figure out how to tie that thread back on to get that in there. It gets very difficult. But like if you use your code more like, or if you approach your code more like Lego blocks, almost like these self-contained modules you can just pop on top of each other, changing that roof is not a big deal anymore. And I actually thought, since you watched our talk yesterday with Nicole, like the utility-based CSS, it seems a lot like that to me. Like just saying, you know, bring in rounded corners, or bring in this background color for this element, as opposed to saying, well, here's a new class and here's what it does, and it overwrites this one, but not these things. And like that, all those like considerations on that's where I see like this complecting happening. I see you trying to jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that utility first CSS, to be honest. But on the other hand, I don't have enough experience.
Do you see the analogy though? Do you see the analogy I'm drawing?
Yeah, like you end up with 20 classes on a single element rather than having like an object from object-oriented CSS or a component from component CSS.
Yeah.
So I don't like that utility approach, but I can't say I have enough experience to say whether it can be good.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan at all.
Yeah, that's fine. So let me understand though why you don't like it. Is it because you have to like put 20 classes on something just to get it to go?
Yeah, I think it's too hacky and like it's very brittle in my opinion. Like you can't really change stuff across your application. You'll have to go and change every single component to
every place
coherence at all.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I haven't done much with that, so I don't know. But yeah, we'll have to have Nicole on later to respond. So
it's strictly a very subjective opinion. It's not based on real experience using it.
Yeah, that's fair. But anyways, not to get too caught up into that. I think going back to like declarative versus imperative programming, my daughter is knocking at the door.
Well, but I don't think it's declarable to say, give me rounded borders, give me a large margin top. I think it's declarative to say, give me a panel. Here's the header. Make it work. Make it look great.
So you're talking about styles again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am.
Fair.
And it's kind of the same thing with Angular templates, right? It's also very declarative because we use the components and the directives to kind of say what we want, not how we want it. Like not every single piece of HTML.
Right. That's fair. I don't know. I kind of assumed in some way, and maybe I just don't have a good grasp on the utility things. But I kind of assumed like you'd come in with like these list of classes, and you'd build something else out of those, and that's how you could kind of go through and make something that, like you said, isn't quite so brittle while still using the same similar approach. So you can kind of theme things more that way, maybe. So I don't know.
It's definitely very much like a bunch of Legos, but it's like
too many Legos.
Set. Yeah, it's like a box of Legos, not just one set. So you'll have to do a bunch of work to like do a whole figure. Like, yeah, that's how I view it. Anyways.
Yeah, that's fair. James here. I think James, as always, sir, you are wise. You are wise beyond your years. James, I think, is actually a much better programmer than I am. Yeah, I've told him that many times. Go into switching up from styles. I don't want to talk too much about styles because I'm just out of my element. You know, Lars, you've been watching the live stream. I've got no styles on anything. I'm pretty far. I think I am. But sorry, were you saying something? I think I talked over you.
Yeah, I said that I did enjoy the episode last night. I think and Nicole had kind of similar experience that I had. I did a lot of websites and e-commerce and knowledge universes and brand universes and blogs and all of that. Working with graphical designers and having to do pixel perfect websites based on Photoshop files and all that.
Oh my goodness.
Hacking SaaS.
I don't want to be in that world. James knows this. We had this workflow for a while I really, really liked, which was we had our designer who's actually really, really good at HTML and CSS and like could get through stuff with jQuery. He just built out these wireframes, we'd call them, and he'd hand them off to us as like a standalone application that was built on a JavaScript framework. We just kind of be handed these, and we just made it work like in Angular, like with actual data. Like he wasn't actually like populating this or hitting any APIs or anything. He was just kind of like making things work with dummy data, and that was really, really nice to work with. I always thought I was going from that company to like the broader community. I always find it weird that more people don't go through that workflow. I imagine it's because there's not just it's hard to find developers who have those skill sets. So maybe the guy we were working with was just exceptional that way. But, yeah,
it's a acquired talent, or you kind of, you definitely have to have an interest in it. But yeah, that was, yeah, we can talk about that another time. But I fell in love with HTML and CSS very early on.
Nice. So did you start with like the UX side of things?
No, I started full stack, and then I guess we can talk about it now.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's supposed to be about reactive, but I'll try to make it short. So I started full stack with PHP and Laravel and MySQL and all of that goodness. Rebuilt a product and kind of made the split between server side and client side, and started using a client side framework. It was Knockout.js and Durandal. Kind of ditched AngularJS because it seemed too complicated for a new developer.
I won't fight you there.
But I was pretty frustrated with HTML and CSS. We used Bootstrap 3, was new at the point. Responsive web design was pretty new as well. But I was really frustrated that I couldn't figure out like how did they make this? I mean, we bought some theme and we just tried to customize that, but I couldn't figure out how they move that thing to the left or center it or whatever. I wasn't satisfied with just finding answers on Stack Overflow. I really wanted to understand, like, this is some form of, I mean, some people will say it's
wizardry,
not a programming language, but there must be some logic. Like, this is a computer reading this and making something based on it. There must be some logical system, and of course there is, but you really need to go deep to understand it.
Yeah,
there's a whole history to HTML and CSS you have to learn about as well. So that's when I moved in. I started as a junior developer in like an e-commerce agency, and went through a bunch of ad agencies and more digital commerce and stuff like that. Worked with some really great graphical designers, and really perfected my craft in terms of visual web development. And that was pretty cool. But
awesome.
Then I got kind of bored with doing small websites and web shops and all that, so I want to get back into the action, like application programming. And I joined an R&D division. That was pretty cool, and started building frameworks on top of Angular. And now I'm in a product team as well, building a platform that's more infrastructure, but also Angular. And so I've been through a lot, but that experience of really getting into the nitty-gritty details of HTML and SAS and all that, that's still sticking. And I see a lot of developers don't have that common ground. So there's more, like you said, there's more of, I think you call it the data, whatever, developer, visual developer.
Yeah, let me explain that for people that maybe missed that one. So this is a like ongoing conversation Nicole and I've been having. I think should see joy. That I kind of see. So coming from my experience with working with this design I was telling you about, I just see this kind of like clear divide or separation of concerns almost between having a UX developer who is like it's this very focused skill set, like the one you were talking about, honing and like working with designers and getting it just right. It's like this looks completely different from like a lot of the stuff I tend to gravitate towards, like working with RxJS to establish state and work with my APIs and make sure data is there when it needs to be and it's coming in the right way. Those two things seem like completely at odds. Hey, let's.
I sure can. Exactly. I mean, I just spent 4 weeks developing a date picker component.
Yeah.
What did you do yesterday?
Date pickers.
So
Oh,
that, like,
my swan song at my last company was like this this date range picker actually, and I went from the bottom and like started with like control value accessors components all the way up to like going from a calendar to two calendars with presets to two calendars with presets for both of them.
yeah,
So
crazy stuff.
yeah.
It's very
So
different
date
from
pickers.
everyday application development and like server integration and RX observables and all that. It was a entirely different skill sets.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad to find out they're still using my date picker, date range picker over there.
Nice.
Very nice. Did y'all ever get to use Angular elements to like so you could use it with the React stuff? I'll let James answer that later.
Okay. Oh yeah,
Interesting
we
stuff.
should get back on track though.
Yeah.
Did you have some topic planned?
Well, let's do you want to look
I
at
can
those
share a
stack
war
blitzes?
story as well.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's
Like,
start with your war
I had
story.
to onboard C# developers to Angular, and
Okay.
they were used to maybe doing some WPF, Windows Presentation Foundation, which is desktop C# applications, and they have two-way data binding kind of. They have like maybe some MVVM, like model view model,
Yeah.
with two-way data binding, very similar to some of the first generation web frameworks and client side as well, like Ember and AngularJS and even Knockout was kind of that way. But they were not really used to this concept of reactivity.
Hmm.
They were relying on, like you said, the automatic change detection in Angular, which is just, it's just help for making it easy to learn Angular, basically.
Well,
From my
yeah,
point of view.
there's nothing wrong with it, but it's almost like once you get a taste of the other stuff, it's hard to go back.
It is.
Isn't it?
It is. So they were like, for example, they were doing, of course, we have some shared state, like the user profile name and claims and all that stuff
Yeah.
that we need to share throughout the application. The problem there is, I mean, you need something to trigger that change detection when that data like comes down from the server. We had a WebSocket connection open all the time, but then
Okay.
too many messages were coming in. It was like there was a lot of data going on. Like it was automation for factories, so there was a lot of events and IoT going on with the devices communicating, and a lot of that was communicated to the front end as well. So it was too much for Zone.js, so they just disabled it for WebSockets, right? Run outside of Angular zones. But then, like, every request was also through that WebSocket. So when they like logged in and got back, oh, you're this user and so on, that state wouldn't really like trickle down to the components because nothing
So they'd
triggered
be
that
like
change detection
subscribing to
state.
the WebSocket to listen for these messages. Set those messages. I'm guessing like inside of a service, like it synchronously or imperatively, just setting them on properties on the service, and then Angular change detection wouldn't know that the user's updated. Is that the idea?
Zone.js has patched basically WebSockets and HTTP calls and all that. So that's where like, oh, we need to run change detection because some data arrives, so we probably need to update some components, DOM elements, right? But if you opt out of that, like you need to let it know that, oh, something changed.
Yeah.
When do you do that? So now you have to handle it for like every request. Oh, this request updates something interesting, so maybe I need to run. Oh, how did I run that change detection again? And there's multiple ways to doing it. So I was trying to like also like, how would some component know when to react when this like is logged in Boolean is is changed? So I was trying to teach them like, we need observables for this. No, I just need to update this property because they were used to that in the C# world. So yeah, that was a bit of a struggle.
Yeah. Well, I think Aaron Frost asked about people's like first encounters with state management in Angular. I forget if it was first or worst. My first was so this was when I was just first learning the Angular stuff. Just got like fresh out of the course I took in like a weekend. Just ran through it, and I was like, well, we had this app that was it was like an admin controller, an admin control panel. So it was just a whole bunch of forms. And it was kind of like a shopping cart too. So like when you made a change, we'd like highlight this thing has changed. We'd show like how many changes there were in the top left. You could click into that. It'd show all your changes. You could like discard them piecemeal and then eventually hit yes. Go make these changes on the server. And the way I did this, I used template-driven forms and I used do check hooks. Oh. And I made that thing reactive. Like it's not impossible to do it imperatively. But man, was it a mess. James, I feel so bad for y'all. He's kind of left with that mess. But and in addition to that, wasn't entirely solid on the services and how to use them. So I'm just writing like the entire state to local storage each time and loading it back up on each page load. So it worked pretty well though. Like I'm still proud of that thing just in terms of what it did. I remember telling my manager at the time, I'm really proud of what it did. I would not be proud of anyone looking at that code though. So this was like before the code reviews that I mentioned on yesterday's broadcast too. So there's a switch where we started doing code reviews, and that's where James and I actually like got to. I think we had this really, really nice feedback loop where he'd learn something and then I'd learn it because I'd review, and we get to the point where we just like come to each other with this like cool stuff, this cool thing about Angular we learned or something like that. So that kind of environment was super cool to work with, and getting that, trying to make that, you know, in our clients. That's kind of like my passion when Narwhal drops me off somewhere. See if I can get that same feedback loop. So yeah, James. Right. I miss you too, buddy.
By the way, the trick that kind of like now that we disabled that WebSocket, right? And no state change from the server is triggering change detection. How do we opt back into that? So what I was trying to teach them was, well, we create an observable and then we bind it to a component, right? With the async pipe, because the async pipe will kind of kick that off, or well, that now it gets tricky, and you'll have to like listen to that whole episode of myth busting the async pipe, because the async pipe, it marks components as dirty, but it doesn't trigger change detection. It still needs some ng zone to kick off the change detection cycle. So we had to do even more hacks. So that was really bad.
Yikes, man. Yeah, that sounds crazy.
Should have buffered the WebSocket instead, like loading the data in chunks.
Yeah, I remember at RxJS Live, this conference I was at, I forget who it was, but their talk revolved around this this clip from I Love Lucy, where they're working on this conveyor belt. They're at like I think it's a chocolate factory, and they're supposed to, as the chocolate comes down the conveyor belt, they're supposed to wrap it, and then like let it go on and let it keep going. And it starts off going fine. They're wrapping stuff up and like it's going all right. But then somehow like the conveyor belt starts like going at double speed, and they can't keep up, and they start like shoving the chocolates into their mouths and trying to eat them so they don't get in trouble for missing out on wrapping them. I think the word for this was back pressure. I think this was this Jay? I think this was Jay Phelps that did this. Is that right? Yeah, Jay Phelps. Yeah. So RxJS core team member.
I think Alex has written or spoken about it, or both.
About back pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that image of the two ladies working on the conveyor belt, that was just perfect for imagining that.
I think I've seen it.
Yeah. So you're saying you would buffer those so there's more time in between them, or would you debounce it? So I guess probably you want to buffer. So
yeah, I mean, I've seen kind of the same thing with in a React application. We had a WebSocket connected to basically almost every IoT device the company had out there for all their clients, and we were talking tens of thousands of units, or even hundreds of thousands of units sending data several times per minute, and all of that data is like going through a WebSocket to one poor little browser. And
a poor browser.
Yeah. As you might imagine, like React or any framework trying to like update that quickly that kills the session.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think at the first run it was actually done with just HTTP, but that wasn't very good as well because they had to make like a lot of requests. So that was poor as well. So there are similar hacks you need to do in React to do that, but I think one easy approach is just to chunk it up so that the data is only pushed into the application like once per second or twice per second, not like hundreds of updates per second.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting you bring this up. I don't know if you've caught the episodes where I've mentioned this. I really want to get, so we've got like the social media platform I've been working on when I'm just by myself. I'd really like to get that to a point where it's using WebSockets like everywhere for everything. WebSockets are so nice in some way. I imagine there's probably obstacles with that too, where you're sharing, like you get to weird parts, I think, where you're sharing state between server and client. It's easier to do that, I think, when you got a socket connection going between the two.
So RX actually have you seen the WebSocket subject?
Yes, I have. I think
it
so.
It has the multiplexing capability, so that you can share one WebSocket, but like giving like similar to a service bus on infrastructure, like you kind of use a topic or some kind of like a unique key to, for example, this is my request through the WebSocket, and when something comes back, because it's not like HTTP request response is like you send a request and something comes back, but it might not be your response, so you have to kind of filter on something. So RX has a mechanism for sorting that out.
I'll have to take a closer look at that. I've done stuff with sockets between my Angular stuff before. That was before I really got into ArcsJS. I did have the WebSocket coming in as an observable, but I remember I kind of like hacked that together with like Socket.io, the Socket.io client, and just like making it observable from the callbacks coming from that. I imagine by now they probably have their own observable implementation, but I don't know if I'd even needed it anymore with ArcJS having it out of the box. So yeah, like the thing with the WebSocket is you have like the one funnel coming in. So you gotta like filter out those messages. It seems like really close to ArcJS or NGRX, doesn't it? Like with that action being dispatched and then stuff coming back in. It's a little different, like because you're not just using selectors to like put it on the screen. The stuff you receive, you actually need to set it in your local state properly, or maybe pipe it into your local state. Kind of the way I think of it now, but actions of my, what is that thing? The other A word.
Oh.
No. I'm not throwing any shade there. I'm extremely fond of NGRX store and entity and effects. All that stuff is amazing. Effects maybe even more so than store. I think that event stream, that global event stream, or the global action stream, is awesome. Actions are no longer the crust of the NGRX pizza.
What is that global action stream? Where's that
from? So the action stream, let's talk about this. Let's actually let me pull up. I'm going to pull up the NGRX docs, and I'll switch my screen over to that, because there's a really interesting. Let's see if I can find it. Getting started. It's somewhere here in getting started. There it is. All right, let me switch to the screen over here. Like so. There we go. It did. Let me get rid of that overlay. So this is kind of the image that we always see when we think of NGRX, and it's very similar to like the one you'd think of with Redux. Are you familiar with this image, Lars?
I haven't seen that one before, but I've seen very many similar images, of course.
Okay, so you kind of understand what's going on here, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So the way I see it, I think I convinced, I think it was Wes. I convinced Wes to make this line over here dotted, because I see this over here, like this grouping of things over here. This is store, right? So you can do NGRX where you're just dispatching actions, you're just selecting from stuff, and
Right.
like that's its own contained cycle. Effects, I actually don't see. So effects are in NGRX. If you're not super familiar with it, effects is like a class you create where you have all these observables of actions that you register. Register is a bad word, but you know where I'm going. You set up these observables, and they just kind of sit there and listen. They sit there and listen for stuff to happen, and they dispatch actions based on that.
Right.
So, and you usually trigger them from an action. You don't have to, but you usually trigger them from an action, and they usually end up dispatching a new action. And that kind of feeds into this other cycle that's going on over here. But the thing that's sourcing this effects, like if you look at all the docs and all the best practices, it's always coming from the action stream. So you inject the actions. It's an observable of every action that gets dispatched as you go through things. So it's like, if you think of it in terms of like Redux dev tools, if you're familiar with that, Lars, the ledger on the left-hand side where you see the actions coming in one at a time, it's like an observable of that comes through. I think there's a lot of times you can actually, I think a lot of times we put stuff in the store that doesn't belong there. Like we put stuff in the store that we could just determine from the action stream. And I think like that action stream may be more important. Like you could maybe do NGRX without having a store. Like I think that's maybe a thing. Well, you need the actions. You'd still need the actions. The actions are like the thing about NGRX. So
not for the component store. NGRX is more than the store.
That's true. I'm sorry. I'm still living in pretend world. So yeah. So state management is now more than just store and effects. So I need to still dive into that more.
Did you convince the NGRX team to expose that action stream? Is that the thing you're trying to say?
I think I convinced Wes to make this line dotted. Before, this was a solid line. These were solid lines going back and forth. I wanted to say, no, these things can be separate if you want to. So
yeah, the action stream is it becomes clear when you're trying to test effects, right? Because then you start with the action stream and you set up your effect, and then you kind of push something into that stream of actions.
Right. I think we were doing those unit tests on stream before. Yeah. So I really like the way that works. I've said many times on the stream, I don't really like unit tests, but I do like them for observables because I think marble tests are very, very powerful.
Right. You did the marble test. I was there for that. That's right.
Yeah. So testing effects using unit tests, I think, are awesome. So yeah, I think let's see, we got Alex. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe I'm just talking out of my. Maybe I'm just talking out of something else. But yeah.
Alex has a small present for you, and I was kind of curious when that would be published. If you look a bit further in the comment stream, further back, there's now a usage section of the documentation for component store. I know you want to get into the component store. And
let's take a look.
I think I might have pushed him a little bit to do that because for some reason he really wants me to use component store, and I'll give it a go.
Nice.
No, I think it's really like that kind of documentation is really helpful for getting started and learning stuff about this new concept.
There it is.
And how it's different. So the usage. which page are we on now? Is that the usage?
I got into usage. I was still on some cached stuff. Alex told me
Okay.
to refresh. So this is
Great.
usage
So
here.
there's a few examples there of it was at least there were some examples of local UI state using the component store.
Do I need to go lower for that?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, there's one. What's the first one? It's like I can't really read your text. Maybe you can.
Oh, I'm
tell
sorry.
me.
Let me see if I can make it bigger here. Is that better? Let me get this out of the way. Sorry, I'm still learning how to stream.
I might have to use a bigger screen here. Okay, now I can read it.
Okay.
So which component is this example? I forgot. Maybe scroll down a bit. Oh, it's the slide toggle, right?
Yeah, slide toggle.
So that is using the component store as the raw service injected into this component, which I think Alex kind of likes better, and so do I, to have it more encapsulated as a special service, not just the raw component store. And that's the second example, because that's where you have a more complex example. That's the example 2 is with the paginator. So he basically re-implemented the material, Angular material paginator, and used a kind of a special service that wraps the component store. So it is.
Am I still in an older state for this, or is it just not up yet?
I don't think that part is done yet.
Okay. Gotcha.
So yeah, the first thing that I was asking about was how to do local UI state, because you can use the component store for multiple things, like we discussed a little bit on your stream. Local UI state is one thing, but then you can also have like some state shared between a few components or a few related components. And
Gotcha.
Alex has some ideas, I see, for many more use cases. But does it say like complex common component state, complex independent component state, application-wide singleton service, as we discussed, right?
That sounds familiar.
I think Alex explained a little bit about these things in his talk about this component store, maybe in the stream with Brandon as well, the kind of the release party stream.
So Alex was actually presenting on component store at the Seattle JS meetup that I presented my imperative versus declarative talk at. So I got to hear the first round through of it. I need to dig into this code more. I don't want to do it on stream because I get too nervous. But I want to dig into this later.
I know you were asking about it, so now there's more comprehensive documentation. And
this looks awesome.
So
right now I'm actually on stream. I am working through my own pagination component using control value accessors. So I'm trying to start out using just Angular forms to like show this is how you could do it now. And it's going to be clunky. And that's just the way it is because forms are in the state they're in. But I want to see if we can go from there and so we're building end-to-end tests as we go. So each time we notice something wrong with the paginator, or we say, well, it needs to support this feature too. We write a new end-to-end test, and we just keep going until everything gets green. I'd love to get to a point where I could say, here's the forms, and then we go to look at this stuff for the component store, and we see how can we make this better. Can we? I think there's some way to combine these things. I'd really like to contribute in some way on forms because forms are my jam. Yeah. And I want. Yeah. I think they were pressuring me up there. That would be awesome. The problem is I don't know what it should look like yet. Like I just don't. Forms are a complicated thing. Like it's weird because the user at any time can go in there and like adjust stuff. You need to be able to adjust what your value looks like, but you also need to be able to programmatically do that. And the limitation I see right now with forms is when you do that control value accessor, you can get something that's kind of reusable, but the reactivity is entirely encapsulated and contained to that one component. it doesn't bleed out. Like it can't. I think there's probably something in there that will something about that. If we can get the reactivity to not be a black box, but to rather let something happen where maybe with like where you would write value instead of having that be a function or a method that has a function that you call. Maybe we could just write value by like allowing us to declare an observable, like passing in an observable for that thing. That could be one way to make it flow easier. So I don't want to promise anyone anything. I've been staring at that that design doc that Brandon sent me. I'm like, what do I want it to look like? I still don't know. I'm still trying to work at it. I'm still trying to get to a place where I could actually do something meaningful there. I can show people how to use control value accessor. I've been trying to do that for a long time now. I think there's a lot of power in that. I think there's a lot of, and I think it's a lot simpler than people assume it is. But I think it's just such a kludge to work with. You've got to have like multiple versions of the forms, like an inner version and an outer version, and it gets super complicated.
How do you like inherit or give your validators to your parent or inherit the parent's validators?
It gets complicated. So you can do ng validator. That's the thing I've been warming up to more recently. When I first released my forms course, I actually said, don't even worry about it. Like just like create these pure functions to determine your validation and reuse those inside of, like reuse those in the inner version and the outer version. And that way they'll stay in sync, because that actually made more sense than trying to pass through the ng validator and trying to figure out how do I make that work if this has a special case where it needs some special validation.
Yeah.
So
I see my colleague Javad has joined us.
Yeah, who's he? Is that BitCollage or
no? Javad with
Javat's this right here.
Yeah, he's my colleague.
CVAs are great. They don't need to be bad. I think. I don't know. Maybe you got some war stories I just don't know about. Maybe you've seen some shit, Zavast.
We've been in the trenches working on that date picker and a few other components together, and it's been a real struggle, but we just landed it a few days ago.
Nice.
And he went on vacation like a month ago. Going, I need to figure out how to do this. I'll ask anyone I know. And I'm like, just leave it, man. Like,
yeah, just leave it. No, let me tell you this story. This is what James knows well. There's this one page we had. So a lot of our stuff is like at my old shop is working with like really massive forms. Like that's the app. It's a massive form, and like you submit in different places. But this form was particularly massive in that we had 7 days of a week. BitCollage CVA is control value accessor. It's how you, so if you think of like the forms control, the reactive forms, like creating a form control and attaching it to an element in the DOM. CVA is how you make like a custom component that you can just attach a form control to. Which is super cool, and I think it actually it works a lot better than other ways that you can do forms. So that's why I go into that. But I'm getting to that with the story. But we had 7 days of a week that we needed to have. For each one of those days, we had open hours where you could set a start and an end, and they could be also open all day or closed all day. And we needed to have those as checkboxes. And so we needed though, for based on those drop downs and checkboxes, for inside of each one of these 7 columns to show a input for each 30-minute slot of the day that was relevant, that they were open for. And I remember like there's that. Let me see if I can find this here. It's always sunny in Philadelphia, and it was like the meme with the mailroom. I actually used to be a mailroom guy, so this one has like a particular flair for me. I don't know if y'all can see that. It's like he's got this conspiracy with the mail, with where it's going. And I remember James and I were in the same room at this time. I remember just like dropping like sitting down, I wasn't even looking at the computer. I was just writing on my paper, drawing this map of, I was on this kick of using behavior subjects, where instead of using operators, I figured out this great way where you could just call next on a behavior subject inside of a subscription to another behavior subject, which seemed really great. Like I didn't need to learn about operators or what they really did. I could just kind of like be smart enough to hack it to make it work like a switch map or something like that. And doing that made my life hell as more and more features came on for this one thing. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, James. I think he probably had to fix all this.
He inherited your mess.
He inherited my mess. I'm so sorry, James. And this was with me saying at some top level, I just need one form group. I just need one form group, and I can go all the way down at this level and say, I'll just listen to this one part of the form group, and when you click on the drop down, I'll insert some more things to this form array, or I'll take some things out, or I'll update them. We also had features where you could copy from one day to another. That needed to be like done in place. We also had stuff where you could like copy from one template to another, and you could like do a whole bunch of them at the same time. So it was like as soon as I got this out the door with like most of the stuff in, it was like, well, we need to be able to copy. We need to be able to copy it. And somehow that would break things. I'd just be like, how? And I go back to my map and see, oh, I drew it wrong here. But moving from that to actually, there's a couple allegories in that. One is don't do what I was doing with behavior subjects. That's the reason I feel bad about that tables article I wrote, is because that's what I'm doing in that tables article. I'm like, you don't need operators. You can just like do this stuff. And this was before I had this episode. I was like, this is a really bad idea. But so one thing is use operators when you can. But another one is don't think you're smarter than you are. Like don't make yourself have to be able to juggle all these things. Take it, chop it up into a part. Like the way, so I ended up like redoing this problem because it haunted me for my forms course. I was just like, just break it up, chop it up into, first you have your input. That's all. Next, we're going to have a series of inputs where you have it from, you pass in a start date, you have an end date. It's just going to give you one object that gives you for each one of those time slots, this is what it is. And then you do that, and now you've got one of those for each day. And then you add in another CVA to do like the drop downs in the checkbox. And then you start just putting those together and slowly piecing them on top of each other. And you can use Cypress. Another just shameless plug for Cypress. I love Cypress. You can use Cypress all the way along to make sure you're not breaking anything as you go. So you set up your tests, you pin these things in place, and you keep going. And then you eventually, like, you go in that way. Like if you're thinking about it in terms of like time complexity, your minimum time and your maximum time aren't going to be that far apart. Like if I was like went galaxy brain and like got this right the first time doing like the Charlie method, that's this character's name is Charlie. Like the minimum time I would have spent on this stuff is pretty small. I feel like I could have just like knocked it out in an hour if I got it just right like that first time. But because I didn't get it just right that first time, and more features needed to be added that I didn't foresee and all this other stuff, my max time was huge. Like my max time was like weeks, weeks on this thing, versus, you know, going this other way where you take this small thing and you go to, you go make a control value accessor, and you plug that same control value accessor into a bigger one, wrap that in value accessor, and keep going. This is what I did with the calendar during my swan song for this company, and that worked out so much better. It definitely took a lot longer to get the initial thing out the door, but once it did, it felt solid. I hope it's still solid, James. You can let me know if it fell down in some way.
As Alex said, you can always switch to the date range picker of angle material. that just landed in version 10.
Nice. So James, just throw my stuff out.
Date picker has been there for a while, but now it has a date range, so you can select like start and end date.
Yeah. When did date picker get there? Do you know? I feel like it's been there for a while. We couldn't use materials. That was another thing. But this goes back to like some of the conversation me and Nicole were having about like the CDK. How I wish. I don't know. Is there a CDK date picker, or is there just a material one? Maybe Alex, you know.
Probably not a CDK one.
Yeah. I really wish there were. I really wish they exposed things that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's asking too much of them. Like it just is. I could wish, but
well, the date picker itself, you can use that with another like input field and open it with whatever style button. But the calendar part of it will be the material style. So if you want that to look very differently, you have some work cut out for you.
Yeah. Oh, James is saying CDK is really low level components. They did it for the table. And that was awesome.
And the stepper.
And the stepper.
And the tree.
Yeah, what now, James? No, I'm just playing, man. But yeah, I wish the CDK was that, because that feels like more of a component developer kit. So I don't know. Table has a lot of business logic, Alex saying. I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that or not. I need you here, Alex. I don't want to like straw man you. But yeah, I reached out to Alex. This is how I've been trying to get people on stream. I just send them these images, and I'm like, question mark. That's how I got branded on. So
great.
So anyway, I sent one out to Alex too. So we'll see if he comes back. But yeah, I'm noticing now, like, we're having a great stream. We're over time. Trying to think if there's anything else we really want to talk about. Let's go back to this view over here. Hold me hostage was a serious pick. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up, Lars?
No, not really. I think we got past all of that in the beginning. I was just trying to promote in-depth.
Yeah.
So I can do that one last time. Go to indepth.dev, apply to become a writer if that's your thing, and you can join the community of writers where we help each other out, and you can find a mentor and get review of your articles and improve your writing skills. Get the graphics for like images for your articles, and we have a pretty cool rich text editor similar to Medium. We also support Markdown in the editor, and we have some pretty great syntax highlighting in the articles themselves. So it's pretty good for code, which Medium isn't. So you don't have to use gists, embeds anymore. You can just use our inline code editor instead.
You're getting major props in here, Lars. Good job, man. Thank you do at In-Depth. Thanks for putting out the podcast. The podcasts are great. I'm going to try to listen to those middle two. They sound amazing. I hope you come out with more. There's a really great content. You got some really great people at In-Depth. So
right. I'm looking for guests and topics as well, but it shouldn't be all about Angular. It should be more like general things and maybe other frameworks as well. I would be happy to get some guests about that. So get in touch with me directly.
Good deal. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Probably Twitter. DM is open. My handle is LazyDK. Spelled in a funny way.
Oh, dude, you know what I did? I'm still learning all this stuff. I'm pretty sure I had our display names off the whole time. I don't know.
My name is probably too long to fit it all in there anyway.
That's true. So. I had to redo my template for having a guest streamer for you, but it's okay. I'm glad I got it all in. I remember you saying on one of the things your name's a good checker for long names.
Yeah, that was with Brandon, I think.
This is Brandon.
Yeah, but search for my name. I mean, I have 3 last names, so you should be able to find me and only me, no one else.
Yeah.
There is a famous other guy called Lars Brink, but he's a lot older than me, but he's doing like some crazy science stuff. That's not the guy. Look for the angle on the web guy instead. That'll be me.
Sounds good, man. And here, before we wrap up, I just wanted to do some pitches for next week. Lars, you've been an awesome guest. I'm very excited to say we're pivoting from this to a great week coming up next week. We got Aaron Frost. I'll use my thing. We're going to talk about Scully on Tuesday.
Nice.
I've got Wes coming on Wednesday. We're going to talk about Vue.
Oh, the traitor.
I know. I know. Going to Vue.
And he left to Vue.
No, he did what he had to do for his family.
Yeah,
but the Vue thing is inexcusable. but yeah, and then Thursday we'll have Jeff, the big boss. He's given his big boss space. And then Friday we have the only Brandon in chat. So I'm really looking forward to next week. We'll only have Monday to do live coding, but that's okay.
Great lineup.
I know. So this was awesome, Lars. I'll need to have you on again sometime. I think we had a great conversation.
Yeah, maybe we can work on some code. Like with me on the stream with you, not just in the chat.
That would be awesome. I love the idea of programming. Like I said to Nicole, though, I don't want to make that an impetus for coming on the show. I'd love to have like a conversation first, like what we're doing here, and then maybe later we can jump into. Maybe we can do through component store together. I don't know. Maybe I'll save that for Alex if I can get him on. That sounds like a good thing. A good thing for Alex.
Definitely.
So yeah,
it's been great. You have a nice weekend.
Thanks everyone for coming. I'll see you next week. Bye now.